So the talk I'm going to give now is on investor influence. And studying influence and persuasion has completely changed my life. It's what our business foundationally is based on. One of my earliest mentors, Evan Pagan, taught me the basics of influence and persuasion. But many times I've learned with mentors that you want to swim upstream. And if you're reading books and studying and learning from 3 to 5 people, and they keep on mentioning Dan Sullivan, or they keep on mentioning Jay Abraham, or they keep on mentioning Robert Cialdini, then you want to swim upstream and learn directly from the source, right? It's like when I'm reading the 240 books authored by billionaires, I don't want to read a book from someone who interviewed the billionaire and thinks they have a pretty good grasp on what's going on in their brain. I want to read the actual words from the billionaire, and I don't care if the book is not as well written. I don't want it filtered by someone who's just a good, stylish writer, you know? So that's what we've done with Robert Cialdini. Studied him for quite some time, and then just last week I was able to interview him one-on-one, and that was awesome. And I also sent my entire team through the Cialdini Institute, which is a training program on influence and persuasion. They don't pay me to say that. I'm not an affiliate for them. It's just I knew the principles work for sure. So we're going to talk a little bit about them here for just a couple minutes. And this is relevant if you are an investor and you're trying to convince a company to allow you to invest to get a board seat, or allow you to invest with a different structure or a different valuation because of your strategic value. This is relevant whether you're an investor or PE fund trying to buy companies and you're trying to convince the CEO to meet with you, reply to your email, take your offer instead of an offer that might be a little bit higher from a PE firm, but maybe they've got a 5-year earnout and a bunch of strings attached, et cetera. And it's relevant to anyone raising capital as well. So after my MBA, I was in the Harvard Coop store in Harvard Square, and I was waiting to go take a tour through the campus, and a student there said, if you haven't read this book, you have to read this book called Influence, The Science of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And I said, oh, really? And he's like, yeah, it's like mind-blowing. It's amazing. So I bought the book that day, read it, and decided to enroll in the Harvard ALM division. It's like a extension school, master's degree in psychology is what I started studying, and studying influence. And in all my classes, I was the only business person. It was all psychologists and psychiatrists in my class, and I was the only person applying it to business. But it was more helpful, many of the classes, than what I took during my MBA. So it's been since 2004 that I've been studying influence and persuasion for 20 years and applying it to our business. And influence is simply just getting people to say yes to what you're requesting of them. You try to influence your kids, try to get them to eat broccoli, try to influence your wife to go on vacation here versus there, or influence an investor to invest $1 million instead of $250,000. That's all influence. And the reason why influence works is that we are all so busy. We get busier every year, typically. More things coming at us, more social media, more pings on the cell phone, more people needing something or relying upon you. And because of that, we don't have time to, if I say you should read Robert Cialdini's book on influence, to go and look at Goodreads and read 100 reviews, ask your social media network for feedback, ask your business partners if they've read it. If you see great reviews on Amazon, it's a form of social proof. You hear me say it's an amazing book, you might just go and buy it, right? You don't have an hour to investigate this decision. And that goes for every part of your life. When you're trying to decide where to eat last night after the conference, same thing goes. You might have heard from someone a recommendation and you believe in their opinion, and just follow that to save yourself time, or just look at reviews. And there's 1,000 reviews, 4.5 out of 5, and it's type of food you like, great. Right, so we all do that. And the busier you become, the more you have to rely upon shortcuts, because you just don't have time to investigate every little fine detail. It's partially why family offices exist, to help you navigate the world and make less $100,000 mistakes once you're very wealthy. But the more information there is in the world, and the more things are going on, and the more successful you are, the more that this matters, and the more that you're working with highly busy founders and investors, the more it matters. In 1873, John Stuart Mill died, and he was the last human being to ever claim to know everything on planet Earth. He said he knew everything about everything, which was probably not very credible to say back then, but no one would even claim to know everything about artificial intelligence or everything about making prosthetic pinkies. It's like, do you really know how to design it and the engineering of it? Do you know the materials? No, you probably just know how to apply them or how to create one, et cetera. So there are over 400,000 scientific journals published every year. There's not one person that probably knows everything in a single one of those scientific journals out of 400,000. And nowadays, knowledge is doubling maybe every year or 2 years. When I first got the statistic, it was knowledge doubling every 15 years, but it's moving way, way faster than that. So the busier we get, the more we have to rely upon shortcuts. That's why influence and persuasion works. And thousands of years ago, if we went to a new region of a country and everybody was going and picking these blueberries on the side of a mountain, and they didn't seem to be falling over or dying or getting sick, then it was like social proof that, okay, well, maybe we should eat these blueberries. That's like a safe thing to do because you're following the herd. And they didn't get sick. It wasn't too bad for them. So why would you want to study this? Just to get more responses, more meetings, more yeses, more compliance. Importantly, Cialdini is unique in that he is a university professor and he's the most cited psychologist alive today who is focused on anything related to business, influence, et cetera. So his strategies are scientifically proven over and over again, and he has over 140 scientific studies cited in his book on influence. It's not just his opinion. I'm like, yeah, I think this stuff works pretty well. I'm pretty sure about it because of these few experiences. It's scientifically proven over hundreds of scientific studies, and he's written many books. So everything you do can be filtered and improved on through the lens of making it more influential. Your pitch deck, your one-liner, how you position yourself, how you introduce yourself, how you follow up with somebody, the marketing you do, what channels you do marketing on. Are you putting out advertisements for companies you want to buy and you're just pitching them? Are you adding value to them first, et cetera? All of that changes the response you're going to get. Whether your brand is Family Office Club or Wilson Conferences immediately changes the perception of what you're offering with a live event drastically. So every piece of communication can be optimized. The interview is live on our YouTube channel, so you can see it. But it was interesting when talking to Cialdini, I said, okay, well, what would work best with the busiest founders on planet Earth, like heads of state, billionaires, centimillionaires, big family offices? They get approached nonstop all the time. What is the best thing to put into a pitch deck or something to get his attention? And he says that the science shows that if you open a loop, people want to close it. If you have a question, people want an answer to that question if it's related to their life, their business, et cetera. So starting out with a mystery will make people want to figure out what it is. Like you heard me say yesterday, there's something that Cialdini said can make you 16 times more effective in closing a deal, and I'll share that with you too. But that was me using his advice to open a mystery so people want to close that loop and figure out what it is. And so that was his simple advice that he said is very powerful. I also quoted him yesterday on stage in that he said, after 45 years studying the science of influence and all these scientific studies and everything, I asked him what the number one most powerful thing is. And he said it's having an ethical reputation. People want to put their guards down, be able to trust you're going to do what you say you're going to do business together. So much of business is just trying to figure out, is this going to waste my time? Is this worth it? Is there really value here for the money? It's like so much of our life is just trying to filter things and making sure that the counterparty has good intent or is a good person or is aligned or is really providing what they say they're providing. It's like so much energy goes into that. So he says that ethical reputation is more powerful than anything else that you can study. And he also stresses throughout all of his influence training that you have to be genuine and authentic in your use of influence and persuasion, and look at the natural environment, the natural things that are coming up when you're negotiating to invest in somebody's company or whatever it is, and just use what's naturally there and don't fabricate or counterfeit something that's not genuine. Don't say, we're only going to invest in one company in this niche if you're actually going to be investing in 10 or 20. Because people will see through that sooner, later, subconsciously, immediately, and then you are lying to them, essentially. He said that will backfire, and if you fake or counterfeit, then that's when it's manipulative, but it also just hurts your reputation and will make it so you're way less influential. It's in your own best interest to have an ethical reputation and do things that are natural versus focusing just on one influence strategy and using it again and again and again. One of the powerful things from the interview is he said that you should always try to meet in person. And I know ideally at the asset you're buying or the company you're buying, but meeting in person, he said, is scientifically proven for a normal sales transaction to increase the closing rate by 16-fold. So you're 16 times more effective being here in person at family office club events than messaging the same family office on LinkedIn or via email. Sometimes people on stage say something about, oh, you got to work through referrals, work with people you met in person, and someone in the audience will be like, oh, well, how do I work through referrals? I don't know anyone yet. And then the family office will say, well, you're here. Now you do know me. Now you can come up and say hi and put a face with a name, et cetera. And so 16 times more effective, but those are scientific studies about regular sales transactions, buying cars, buying a purse, purchasing something. You can bet that if you're going to do something that's heavier weighted, like let's say choose a spouse, you're probably going to want to meet that spouse in person at least once, right? If you're going to invest $250,000, $1 million, probably important you meet that person in person, see their manufacturing plant in person. So I haven't done the scientific studies on that, but I don't think we need to know that probably makes it 20 times, 50 times more effective to meet in person. So really important points from Cialdini. I also told him, I know he's been interviewed hundreds and hundreds of times, maybe 1,000 times he's been interviewed. So I asked him, what is the best question that anyone's ever asked you over 1,000 interviews that I wasn't smart enough to think of? And he said, you should not have a favorite influence principle. You should just see what is natural in that environment, what I mentioned a couple minutes ago. He really stressed that is critical. Otherwise, everything's going to look like a nail, and you'll just have this one influence hammer that you try to swing around, and you'll really be at a deficit to how effective you could be in getting things to move forward. So Cialdini has another book called Persuasion. It's a bit thicker of a book, so I encourage you to start with influence if you're going to buy one of his books. But it's a great book, and he talks about one example in the book I think is more powerful than all the rest. And that is that if you're doing estate planning or helping someone save money on taxes or helping them invest money, et cetera, or helping someone grow the valuation of their company, he points out that if you have the frontal cortex, someone's brain, focused on something, whether you're asking them questions, bringing up that you were also in the Boy Scouts and talking about character and doing due diligence and quality of the person, that's now in their frontal cortex. If you talk about the importance of due diligence or data, or the conversation naturally talks about a certain topic, now there's heightened importance and focus on that, and you're hyper aware of that. Kind of like if you buy a car, now you see a Tesla everywhere you go because now you're aware of that specific model of Mercedes, whatever, right? And so by doing that, it changes the perception of your pitch later because you've put an increased importance and you verify that they do act in a certain way or they do prioritize something. So that can highly influence how your presentation goes or your proposal goes. So keep that in mind. And also the other example from this book I loved is that he would say something like, if you first say, well, we're probably going to be able to save you $3 to $4 million on estate tax because of these structures we're putting in place, but we're not going to split that savings with you, and we don't charge $1.5 million, of course, to save you the $3 million. I mean, we don't even charge a tenth of that. We don't even charge $150,000. It's $45,000, and we can help you save this $3 million. And then he says that comparison goes off much, much better versus just saying that your fee is $45,000 because you're taking this big number, and then next to your fee, it makes it look much smaller. If you took a number of $4,000 and then you talked about $45,000, it makes it look much more expensive. That'd have the opposite effect. And so that is persuasion. It's having the frontal cortex be aware of something, and then later in the conversation, later in the meeting, later in the presentation, et cetera, now there's like an anchor there, and it influences their perception, and they have a heightened awareness that is a preference of theirs, or that is something important. So just a couple quick examples. He also said that to have trust in a room or a pitch, you have to admit what's wrong, right? Like, wasn't the best calendar management on my part, having the event on these exact dates. Appreciate you guys being here. But I just admit that that's wrong. I don't act like we're perfect. When you're making a pitch on something, if you act like everything's perfect, people are going to look for the chink in the armor, and they're going to wonder what you're hiding. Like, obviously, you're not as good at all these other firms on all these other things where that's the only thing they do if you offer 6 things. So maybe acknowledge that trade-off, or where is the trade-off? Like, what's the difference between your high-end car versus the Mercedes, or this investment fund versus another hard money lending fund, et cetera. So that's important, just to point out that. What's interesting, though, and I talked to Cialdini about this too, is that so many times when I do this, the person with me in the meeting will be like, why did you say that? That makes us look bad. Why would you say that? That's like not the most strong thing to say. But if you try to look strong, like 24/7, like you're a perfect business, you have a perfect offer, there's no risk, it's going to go amazing, then that's just not good, and that's what the science shows. And it's just, and the investment industry is all about over-disclosure. People should know the risk going up front. They should know the trade-offs going up front, so they really understand it, not just a disclosure on page 19 of a subscription document, but they literally know the trade-off that they're making by working with you, right? It's just the right thing to do anyways, and it's what the regulators want you to do, and it's what your lawyers want you to do, is disclose all the risks. So it's also what Cialdini wants you to do. This is the influence book I talked about. He has 6 main influence principles. He later came out with a 7th one called Unity. But authority positioning is having an expert, credibility, trusted position in a niche. We talked about being number one in your niche by learning, and then you can be hyper-specialized as well. Commitment and consistency is when someone commits to do something, they're more likely to do that again or want to work that way again. Reciprocation, you do something for someone, they want to thank you and do it back or help you back in some way. Similarity, likings, building rapport. They like you or see you as similar to them. It's related to unity, being part of a unified group of founders here in the room. We're all investors and founders pretty much, all looking to scale, learn new structures, new strategies, et cetera. Scarcity, when things are in small supply, they're more valued. And then social proof. If you can point that you have 294 other investors that have trusted you, it's more likely that a new investor will trust you. So these are all important, and we've done a full 6-hour workshop on this presentation that I'm spending 20 minutes on this morning. So I'm trying to talk quick to get through these slides relatively fast, but each one of these, we could spend an hour talking about how to apply it to your business, how to apply it to deal making, et cetera. And probably one of our investor masterminds for 2025 will be on influence, to go deep on it again. So in psychology, they've shown that many times there's these psychological shoots where when you think of something, you automatically associate it with somebody, or when you do something, you do it the same way every day. When you wake up, you first get up and brush your teeth, whatever how you drive to your office, it's typically a routine, and you're following that similar routine. And the more times you do it, the more deep of the rut it is, like water running over a desert, and it gets kind of etched in there in how you do things. So if you can get somebody working with you, they're more likely to work with you again. If you get someone to have a great first experience, more likely to do it again, et cetera. So that's a key area within influence just to know about and be aware of. They've shown that if somebody places a horse on a bet, it's a bet on a horse at a horse race that's scientifically proven, even if it's only $1, that they will be more confident in that horse that they've already bet on, and they'll tell other people about how confident they are in that horse versus before they put $1 on it. So many people, they want to attract family offices. They say $1 million minimums. That's our new level. We're going to play at this new level. But I know $100 million families that like to start out at 100K, 200K, and you make them jump all the way to $1 million, then it can be harder. It's not like the wrong way. Some people do great having $5 million minimums. There's all different ways to get things done. But they might recommend you to other family members or other people if you let them invest. They see how you treat them. They're more likely to spread the word and grow momentum like that. It might not make sense for your model to have 25K minimums or 100K minimums, but it's just something to consider to let people get started and then grow their confidence. The bond and the friendship and connection that someone has with you is scientifically proven to influence the sale more so than the features of your product, your promised investment returns, et cetera. So the actual trust you build, the relationship you build, is more important than some of those bullet points that we might worry so much about related to track record, et cetera. So that's really important. And we've had many people, like Chip Perkins this summer, we interviewed on stage. He's raised $7 billion over the last 40 years raising capital. We've had multiple people we've interviewed in our member portal. One of the most valuable resources that is never the reason why people join our club, but is one of the most valuable things we offer you, is we have 100 talks that are just 10 minutes long, and all 100 talks are from people that have raised $100 million or more. And they have all different ways of getting it done. And we ask them to do like a TED Talk on their number one strategy. And maybe 6 to 7 of those 100 like said almost the exact same thing as someone else. The other 93 all had something unique in their mindset, their approach, their tools, their software, their follow-up, et cetera. So to hear from like simulating having a cup of coffee with 100 people, they've raised $100 million or more, like that knowledge is worth like $100,000 just by itself. And the point of bringing that up is that Chip Perkins said 3 times during the fireside chat, I've been doing this for 40 years, raised $7 billion, and it doesn't get easy. It's still hard. And they still, after that many years, approach 300 plus investors to find the 10 or 15 that'll invest, or they'll approach 1,000 to find the 2 dozen or 3 dozen that'll invest. So if you're having a hard time raising capital, well, first of all, almost everybody is in this economy where it's at right now, but the seeds you plant now will be the ones that are bearing fruit later, is one thing. But the other thing is the most world-class capital raisers on planet Earth, unless your name is Jamie Dimon, like you have a pretty hard time, or Sam Altman, you have a pretty hard time raising capital. And you have to approach a lot of people to get it done. So don't beat yourself up or beat your partner up too hard if they're having a hard time recapitalizing something, or they had a 3-month goal and now it feels like they made no progress. It's just something to keep in mind. So I showed the copies of the book yesterday, I think it was, and the evolution of making them more credible and making them more of an authority position. And it's really important to decide what you want to be an authority on, what sandbox your company or family office is going to compete in, and then make it institutional quality and be very clear about who you're trying to attract, what type of deal flow you're trying to attract, or who you're trying to work with. We had Brian Burke here as part of our investor club. He came to one of our mastermind events, and we told him that he should write a book based on all of his experience and expertise. He did, and then in a month he was able to raise $25 million of LP capital, and he said the book was a huge part of that. He had the experience, he had the track record, but he didn't have the momentum he wanted, and the book helped him move forward with that. A book with not real expertise or value or that track record behind you is not going to magically help you raise 25 million, of course. I found the most powerful combination of 2 influence principles was scarcity and authority, and I just thought that those 2 together are just magical, because if you can become enough of an authority in the sandbox that when people look around in that niche, they can't think of another authority, at least in their knowledge, that is as deep or as focused or as valuable as you, then you become a scarce resource. Like you're a scarce authority because they don't even know 5 in that niche that could help them. And so I thought that was like the magical combination, and I was trying to get another magical combination out of Cialdini, and that's when it came out, where he's like, no, you really need to just be thoughtful of what environment you're in and then react to it in a natural way. But I have found it to be very powerful, super helpful to do that over time. Jay Abraham calls it preeminence, as I mentioned yesterday. So one way to be more influential is to think, who do you trust and why do you trust them? They found that people trust doctors because of their authority position in a hospital to a scary level. They did scientific studies where highly trained, highly experienced nurses were told to inject 2 chemicals that are common sense lethal to give to a human. Like there's no way you would ever want to combine those 2 chemicals. And because this person was wearing a lab coat in the environment of a doctor, the nurses didn't know it was a scientific study. They just had people who are not even doctors, who they didn't even recognize, wear a lab coat and instruct the nurses to inject these chemicals. It was actually saline solution, but a high percentage of the nurses injected what they thought were these 2 chemicals into the patient, and it would have killed them. But the doctor commanded it, and they were in a position of authority, so they just complied and did that. So that's pretty scary, because it's somebody's life on the line. It's not an investment. It's not selling something small or a service. So that's the power of authority. But also, what I found is that many times when you go into an investment meeting, it's a long pitch, and at the end, do you have any questions? And that's like how it goes a lot of the time. So I was like, oh great, we get a chance to pitch. Let's go through our pitch deck page by page, and then we'll see if there's questions. And I think it's the wrong way to go. If you go into a doctor's office and you're having this horrible back pain, and you sit down and the doctor comes in, he's like, let me tell you where I went to school, let me tell you how many patients I've served, let me tell you my track record, blah, blah, blah. And then he stops and says, in the middle of the presentation, he says, this is the best drug for back pain. You should take this. You take these purple pills 3 times a day. et cetera, you're going to be like, well, do you want to look at my back first? Like, do you want to see, like, maybe it's arthritis, maybe I pulled a muscle, maybe I strained something, maybe it's a tendon, maybe it's a vertebrae problem, maybe you want to take an x-ray perhaps. If he's just recommending a painkiller, when you first go in there, it's like, that's not a prescription at all. That's just a sales pitch from a drug dealer, essentially, right? Because it's like, he didn't listen at all. He's just pushing the drug on you. And almost no doctors do that. And that's the point of this slide. We listen to doctors, some of us. I know some are more skeptical of doctors than others, but like, doctors don't do what I just said. They do ask you questions, hopefully. They do x-rays, they do a blood test, et cetera. And that is why it's a prescription, because it's prescribed based on your situation and your ailments. At least it should be. And I think that's the intent of 99.9% of doctors out there, right? And so the point is to be more like a doctor when you're working with other people, to ask them questions, to look at the situation, to see how you could help them. And then your prescription may not be to invest with you at all, or may not be to sell your company to them. It might be to keep in touch. It might be to talk to your friend. It might be to get their financials in order first. It might be to get to a positive EBITDA first, et cetera. So you'll be way more influential if you are first asking questions. You spend most of the meeting asking questions and not pitching. We have a few $100 million families here in the room that I see, and they know that we have them answer 50 questions for us, so they get to know themselves and what they want, but also we get to know them, versus me saying like, hey, we should work together in this way. Because first of all, it doesn't respect who they are, and there might be nuances that I won't get through a simple Zoom call or a single meeting. And I have them fill that out in a Word document, so we don't have a 4-hour meeting, but sometimes we do have a 4-hour meeting, and we go through it live in person. That's up to them, right? So that's exactly why we do it, so we can just be have good intent to make sure that we're doing the things that are going to help them and not waste our time with someone who's a bad fit. So you don't have to have a 4-hour meeting, you don't have to ask 50 questions, but it'd be very rare if you're asking for someone's compliance in an investment deal for you to spend 60% of the time asking questions. They're used to, especially for investors that get pitched, someone coming in with their pitch deck and just going through the pitch deck. And that's just what happens, like 95% of the time. So that's important to know. Stephen Covey says that if you want to be influential, you first have to be influenceable. So first listen, take stuff in, be influenceable, and then be open-minded to changing what you were going to tell them, and then you'll be much more influential. When you've listened first, you can focus on the 4% of what you were going to say that is 90% of what they care about, right? And just focus on building the relationship and understanding them. So that's pretty key. Covey passed away recently. I was able to go to one of his trainings once. Listening is a skill set that most people are not an expert at. Most people can listen at 500 words per minute, which is audible at 2.5x or 3x, but we don't talk that speed. Most people speak at 150 words per minute. So really, the other person, if you're an entrepreneur and you're slightly on the spectrum for ADD and you're fast moving, then when someone's talking slowly, you're now thinking about what you're going to do next, what you're going to reply with, like what you should do next after this conversation, et cetera. And you start making lists of things and writing your to-do list for the next day. It's just how fast-moving, wired people are. And so being aware of that as a fast-moving entrepreneur is really important, because there's some times where you need to slow way down and really listen and take lots of notes on what they're saying and write out bullet points for what you might say next if you really have to, but really try to empathize with their position and what that must be like in their experience so that you understand them at a deeper level. And it's something that will make you much more influential and much more trusted. You actually listened to them and actually only followed up when it was exactly what they asked for. And I know the families we work with, really appreciate that. Gary Vaynerchuk says he's someone who listens, and he's a boxing fan. He said in a world of people who like to jab, he's a counterpuncher, and he just waits, and then he'll make an offer that he thinks is really effective. He's built 3 businesses to $60 million in revenue. Last slide here, and we'll wrap up and get our panel going this morning, is look at the book Persuade or Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, or his book Influence, and think about the frontal cortex and what you could discuss or emphasize that's going to come up that's central to what you're going to be requesting of the person. Don't influence people to do things that's not in their best interest, and do everything you can to have a good ethical reputation, listen before pitching, ask questions, become a scarce authority, enact reciprocation. systematically by being helpful to many people with thought leadership, videos, podcasts, et cetera. And then if 10,000 people listen to the podcast, some of them are gonna get so much value, they feel like, oh, I should engage with them at some point or do business with them, et cetera. Create a credible, singular position for yourself and be the number one resource for a very specific type of investor. So it's highly helpful for them on what you're doing. The last idea here we didn't cover today was the 3 trust curves. We talk about that at a lot of our events, so I'll just mention it real quick. It's just that most deals get done and we've been showing this for years before we heard Robert Cialdini say the 16 times number, that when people have a high trust in you, a high trust in the deal, and a high trust in understanding the industry, if they have a really high trust in you, and it's your brother-in-law, I might not understand blockchain at all, the industry, they might still invest, right? So if you're really high on one of those trust curves, it can overshadow being low. But if you go into meetings and the investor doesn't know you, doesn't know the asset or deal, and they're not local to either of those things, and they're not sure about the industry, you're never gonna close them on working with you. And if you're an investor and you're getting pitches from people and you're getting onto Zoom calls and you don't know the industry, you don't know the person, you're not local to the person or the asset, it's just a waste of your time probably. You probably should not be investing in that thing. So this is related to meeting in person, but usually deals get done more often when you say to yourself as you walk into the room, where on the trust curve are they already? And okay, let's focus this meeting on moving them up the trust curve of really understanding the opportunity. Or let's fly them in and get them to walk through the manufacturing plant, the dry cleaner, the high-tech company, and meet the team, et cetera. So appreciate everyone's attention there. I hope that's helpful to a few people here in the room. It's definitely helpful to how we've built the business. If you are a founder, raising capital, developing real estate, or you're an investor, would love for you to get involved in the Family Office Club. I've run this community for 18 years now. We've hosted 300 live events. We have 17 million social media group members and followers. We have the #1 YouTube channel on family offices. We have the #1 most popular podcast on family offices. You can learn more about us and our membership options at familyoffices.com. We have 30 in-person events planned in 2026 and another dozen events this year. Please go to familyoffices.com to learn more.